Hello team, welcome to another ATP Geopolitics video with myself, Jonathan MS Pearce. This is Ukraine War News Update, the second part thereof for the 23rd of June 2025. This is a pretty substantial military news update. I've not done one of these for a few days and things have piled up and now I've got a backlog of stuff to tell you, so it's very much a bumper edition. Okay. No Reports says the EU plans to boost aid to Ukraine by moving nearly 200 billion euros of frozen Russian assets into riskier investments, aiming to increase returns without touching the principal, avoiding legal challenges while funding Ukraine amid ongoing conflict and budget strains. So the idea is that we need to give Ukraine more money. We have this frozen Russian asset set of spondoolies. What do we do with this money, or what do we do with these assets? Do we give them wholesale to Ukraine? Well, at the moment we are struggling across Europe, so they say, for funds. Everything is a strain, but we need to give more to Ukraine. So we don't want, still not over the tipping point where we want to give these frozen Russian assets wholesale to Ukraine. So can we make more money out of these assets by investing the profits in risky investments to get a higher return on investment? Of course, I assume that this means there is a non-zero chance of that money. Also, like you hear in these adverts, like your investments can go down as well as up type thing. Yeah, if they are higher risk for higher reward, you also have the higher risk and the risk of those investments going south. So anyway, if it results in Ukraine getting more money from the EU, then I guess that's a good thing. Richard Blumenthal, who is the Democrat senator behind the bipartisan bill with Lindsey Graham for putting extra sanctions on Russia, says this.
Let me ask you about Ukraine.
This is, by the way, to Pete Hegseth, the Secretary of Defense.
I've just returned from my 7th trip to Ukraine. I am the advocate, chief sponsor with Senator Graham in the Russia sanctions bill. You said that the United States and the ranking member cited it, that we must start by recognizing that returning to Ukraine's pre-2014 borders is an unrealistic objective and will only prolong the war. My question to you is, when will you release the PDA $4 billion in equipment that Ukraine desperately needs? It's sitting there. Ukraine deserves it. When will it be released?
We're aware of PDA 75, and that is a decision we can make in the future.
So the question is, when will you release the $4 billion worth of already appropriated money to Ukraine through the PDA, Presidential Drawdown Authority? So that's equipment that the US has that they can choose to give to Ukraine. And instead of answering when, he says that's a decision we can make in the future. I'm aware of it. Well done. So you should be. That's a decision we can make in the future. Okay. I ask you when. When will it be given? It is a decision that can be made in the future. Okay. Brilliant. Well done, Hegseth. Pete Kegsbreath. Okay, Ukraine handed the US a multi-billion-dollar weapons shopping list after Trump's administration stopped providing new military aid, Zelensky has said. Now, the weapons package was delivered to US Treasury Secretary Scott Bessent during high-level meetings in Canada, the weapons package shopping list. But, of course, nothing's happened about that. In April 2025, Zelensky announced Ukraine's readiness to spend $30 to $50 billion to purchase a US defense package. He emphasized that Ukraine is not seeking free aid, but is prepared to pay for critical military equipment as a form of security guarantee. And the list includes Patriot air defense systems to protect civilian infrastructure and continuous Russian attacks. But no news on this yet. The US not only does not want to help Ukraine with military assistance, doesn't even want to give them $4 billion of already appropriated aid. No, it doesn't even want to sell them any aid that will make their own defense corporations a pretty penny. Absolutely crazy from the Americans. It was not crazy. It's completely aligned with the Kremlin. Now, Dmytro Zhitenko, and I talked to him about the use of GMLRS, tangentially, by point of fact that he is a drone pilot operating in Donetsk region, and he goes on reconnaissance missions to look at what is worthy of striking, and then calls in whatever equipment is appropriate for destroying whatever the target is, including HIMARS, so the guided multiple launch rocket systems, to go and strike the targets he finds. Well, if he's saying we need more GIMLRs for HIMARS, as in we need more missiles for HIMARS, then it probably gives you an indication that the Ukrainians are running low on those missiles, which is a real shame, because they're not going to get them, I don't think, from the US unless they buy them, and the US isn't selling them anything at the moment. So what happens there? Now, I have heard a rumor that the Saab created GLSDB, which are the ground launched small diameter bombs. So if you think the JDAMs and the GBU-62s, GBU-38s, those are dumb munitions given guidance kits, glide kits, to give them precision, accuracy, and a longer range. So that's taking a cheap dumb munition, or cheaper dumb munition, and giving them those extra skills and dropping those from a plane. Now you can fire them from a GIMLRs as well, and these are called the ground launched small diameter bombs, and they did have these made by Boeing and Saab together, but there was an issue, some complaints from the manufacturers that the Ukrainians weren't using them correctly, but also that they did have limitations and they were getting electronically interfered with. But I believe they come back and upgraded them. We had heard previously that they had successfully upgraded them, but I haven't seen evidence of these being used. There would be a great cheap alternative to your GIMLRs missiles. Well, there is a rumor I've seen that Saab have been working on them, probably Boeing as well, I assume, and that they could be on the cards, I guess would be the implication, but no other detail. Zelensky has said that this year we found $43 billion for the Ukrainian defense industry. There's a lot of investment from outside entities, other nations investing in Ukraine, as is called the Danish model. Ukraine is part of Europe's security, and we this will be a bit of a poor translation. Basically, they would like 0.25% of GDP of a partner state to be allocated for our defense industry for domestic production next year. What this aligns with is what the Estonians said in a report out, goodness me, it's probably as much as 2 years ago now. They brought out really, really good reports saying that, look, if everyone gave 0.25% of their GDP to Ukraine to help defend Ukraine, then they'd easily have enough stuff. They'd just easily have enough stuff. And this was actually met with quite positive overtures by, I remember Dom Nichols from Ukraine the Latest talking extensively about that report, saying, this is a really feasible, well-constructed plan for how we can support Ukraine, and Ukraine would easily get enough stuff. And that's what Ukraine appeared to be calling for there. Now, the new priority in Dutch aid to Ukraine after the delivery of F-16s is drones, according to the country's defense minister, Ruben Brekelmans. In an interview with Ukrinform, so I think he went to Ukraine just recently, he said that Netherlands has delivered almost every weapon system, all type of equipment, starting with helmets. I think the Dutch don't get enough kudos from a number of nations, especially since they've got, they're in this, I don't know if it still is in existence, this coalition with the PVV that is not particularly pro-Ukraine, but since the beginning of the war, they have been strong advocates for Ukraine and have given an awful lot of stuff, even when I think they gave tanks when they didn't even have tanks. So they sort of went down the route, one of the first nations going down the route of appropriating tanks on behalf of Ukraine, even, from abroad, and funding, rather than just giving their own stuff, which they also did. They have given a vast quantity of YPR 765s, the upgraded M113 APCs with a gun on top. So yeah, and of course the F-16s and everything from helmets to F-16s, everything in between. Stinger missiles and Patriot systems as well. Yeah, really strongly behind the provision of Patriot systems, or even elements of Patriot systems to Ukraine. 24 F-16s, incredible. Currently, our new priority is drones, mostly the more sophisticated ones, so not simple FPV drones, but more advanced and sophisticated drones, he said. He also noted that they will continue delivering air defense systems, armored vehicles, different types of ammunition and fuel, as well as, and the fuel, there's one that we don't sort of talk about too much. It's not very, it's not your kind of glory. Woohoo! Check this out. We've got loads of tanks of fuel. People like to talk about tanks and F-16s and whatnot, but actually, those things don't drive if you don't have aviation fuel or diesel or whatever. As well as focusing on everything related to the F-16s and maritime security. So the Dutch really are doing a good job in supporting Ukraine. Hats off to them. Well done. Thank you, the Netherlands. Germany and Canada have agreed to fund the production of Ukrainian anti-Shahed drones, according to President Zelensky. So they are coming together to support that. I mean, Germany's already supporting Ukraine in terms of the manufacture of distance munitions, whether that be drones such as the Luti drone or the Bars drone or whatever, or whether it be, as it could well be, things like the Hrim-2, these ballistic missiles that Ukraine is developing. So Germany's already doing that, but here we have Germany and Canada agreeing to fund the production of anti-Shahed drones, and these are super useful. I think they're gaining momentum in the production of these, the usage of these, since the Russians are throwing so many drones at the Ukrainians at the moment, Shahed drones and similar. Quote, their production is ready to be financed by Germany. Relevant agreements have been reached with the Federal Chancellor Friedrich Merz. Canada will also support their production. This was discussed during a meeting with the Prime Minister Mark Carney on the sidelines of the G7 summit. Good news there. Then we move on to the Norwegian Ministry of Defence. So just I was giving props to the Netherlands. Well, Norway, wow, these guys have really outdone themselves. And they do have the capability to some degree, given their sovereign wealth fund that has made a pretty penny out of the war, given that the oil prices have gone up. Norway is to develop and produce uncrewed surface vehicles, USVs, on Ukrainian soil. So they're going to build these maritime drones in Ukraine. Norway has allocated approximately 6.7 billion Norwegian kroner in 2025 to support the maritime coalition, co-led with the United Kingdom. Quote, parts of this funding will be used to develop and produce uncrewed maritime vessels using KDA technology, with production based in Ukraine, said the Minister of Defence Sandvik. KDA has signed an agreement with a Ukrainian partner to jointly develop and manufacture USVs in Ukraine using Norwegian technology and expertise. Uncrewed vessels play a critical role in helping Ukraine defend its territory and neutralize the Russian Navy in the Black Sea. Defence giant Kongsberg Defence, so another Norwegian enterprise here, and aerospace, defence and aerospace has opened an official office in Ukraine. The company behind NASAMS, already shielding Ukrainian cities, now partners directly to co-develop new air defense solutions. Focus areas, interceptor production. So we just heard Canada and Germany funding that. Now we've got Kongsberg, and we've already got KDA, which is Kongsberg Defense and Aerospace, I presume. So that is the same entity that we've just been talking about with regard to USVs there. The company behind NASAMS, already shielding Ukrainian cities, now partners directly to co-develop new air defense solutions. Focus area, interception production, maritime defense. So there's your maritime defense, and scaling delivery capacity. So the Norwegians really getting involved, particularly Kongsberg there. And then here's another one. So Norway will begin producing uncrewed surface vessels on Ukrainian soil using Kongsberg technology, according to Sandvik. So that's what we heard. So confirmed a €580 million budget for 2025 to support the maritime coalition with the UK. The move boosts Ukraine's capability to counter the Russians in the Black Sea. Then we hear that Ukraine may receive cutting-edge technologies from NATO by the end of 2025. So the alliance has completed testing systems designed to counter Russian guided bombs and strike drones like the Shahids. So this is great news to have NATO on board in this kind of weaponry development domain. Again, we're talking about anti-Shahed, or interceptors or whatever it is to take out Shahed drones, but also technology possibly to take out guided glide bombs. Wow. They're going to be very difficult to take out. I don't know if that's going to be, I presume it's going to be electronic warfare to mess around with the the guidance on those, but there's not an awful lot you can do with a bomb hurtling down to you at a rate of knots. I don't know how easy those would be to shoot down, so I don't know what technology that would be. Now, French aid to Ukraine says, according to the Minister of the Armed Forces, France and Ukraine could cooperate to maintain the Mirage 2005F and Caesar guns in Ukraine. So rather like we've just been hearing with Kongsberg, we now have the maintenance of Mirage and Caesars in Ukraine by French industry. So again, that's the kind of inward investment, but also just improving the logistics footprint for these weapons. Now, Canada is helping Ukraine modernize helicopters to intercept Shahed. So we've already heard about Canada helping in the production of other equipment. Here it is Shahed drone, counter-drone capabilities on helicopters that I presume have already been provided to Ukraine. First of all, that already were there. First of all, we are talking about the installation of Canadian-made detection and targeting stations. So yet again, we have talks about how this won't just be charity. There'll be a return on investment. This will be benefiting, no doubt, Canadian manufacturers and companies in these installations. But it's also about learning what is needed on a modern battlefield and building up your knowledge base by getting that feedback from Ukraine. Now, Ukraine has received the first light-engine two-seater Shark aircraft from the Czech-Slovak company Shark. Aero, equipped with an electronic warfare system, is designed, I think, to go and take down Shahed drones. So there's a picture of it. Aircraft equipped with an antenna for detecting and tracking threats from drones. We can detect electromagnetic profiles of various drones such as Shahed, Orlan, etc. After detecting these drones, we can neutralize them using jammers that we placed under the aircraft. And this was, I think, referenced in my video this morning when they were talking about the provision of aircraft to, you're never quite sure whether this is what people say or whether this is translations. Or whether it's just a vague catch-all term, but they talk about shooting down Shaheds. And I was saying this morning, well, it could be these jammers on these Shark aircraft that I'm going to talk about later, and here it is. Or there could be something else where they're physically using light aircraft to physically shoot down drones, like we've seen with the Yak-52s, the old planes that the Ukrainians are using, particularly in the Odessa sort of region. Someone out, two-seater planes with someone at the back firing a shotgun. Reportedly, the first Shark light piston aircraft made by the Czech-Slovak Shark.Aero has been received by Ukraine, equipped with EW systems to counter enemy one-way attack drones. It's said that the Shark needs to fly relatively close to the enemy drones to be effective. But good news that there's development there. They are getting such an incredible array of weaponry, both offensive and defensive. The Ukrainians, it's amazing that they can keep on top of what they're using and how to use it. New Zealand will provide Ukraine with a new aid package totaling 16 million New Zealand dollars, so 9.4 million USD. The package will include both military and humanitarian assistance. So, cheers, New Zealand. Me choice, mate. That's absolutely awesome, eh? Look, mate, really, really great. Bro, it's awesome, mate. Really appreciate it. Thanks, New Zealand. Yeah, bro. I could do my I'll try and do my Pacific Islander New Zealand accent. Cuz. Yeah, bro. Thanks, mate. Really good to see you here, eh? So on and so forth. I'm just bringing out my greenstone, to give me permission to do this. Very poor permission. I'm sorry. I'm sorry for all those in New Zealand I've offended. Russian foreign. Go and get yourselves a fish and chips, mate. Russian Foreign Intelligence Service has stated that Serbia is using bypass routes to export military products to Ukraine. So there's been this ongoing thing between Serbia and Russia because Russia have accused Serbia of still getting weapons to Ukraine. Serbia have kind of denied this, although it's almost certainly true. Serbia has a foot each side of the fence with regard to Ukraine. Obviously, they want to be set. It's a bit like Slovakia. They want to be seen to be supportive of Russia, kind of from their Russian sphere of influence point of view and the Kremlin oversight. But they also want to be making money off supporting Ukraine. So they're happy to sell stuff to Ukraine. And of course, Serbia are probably producing Soviet era munitions and whatnot. So Serbia is using bypass routes to export military products to Ukraine, according to the FSB. Serbia sends ammunition for heavy long-range systems to Ukraine in the form of assembly parts, which are loaded in the Czech Republic and Bulgaria. I do worry about the Czech Republic because their government looks like they are going to go by the wayside, and we're going to get a right-wing populist government that are not going to be very supportive of Ukraine, one might predict. And that could be a challenge because Czechia at the moment are super supportive of Ukraine. Petr Pavel, Petr Fiala, the president and prime minister, very supportive of Ukraine. But the present coalition government has gone through a number of scandals. Petr Fiala, the coalition is not popular at all. And it's just an open door really for ANO, the right-wing populist party, to get into bed with the far right Czech parties. There's 3 or 4 parties on the far right who, if they agree to go into coalition with the ANO, could bring about a really distasteful government. I would have thought that's not going to be aligned at all to Ukraine. So that's a really big worry in Czechia. Anyway, Visioner says, big news: Ukraine is already producing ballistic missiles with a range of over 500 kilometers, says the Army General Mykola Malumuj, former senior official of Ukraine's Ministry of Defense. So I talked about this previously, but not in a military aid video. This is really good news. They need to be hammering Russia with ballistic missiles. They absolutely need to be scaling up the production of those and then throwing them at Russian air bases and blowing up Russian planes. Ukraine has begun, but so now we're going to move on to a section. So that last one was part of this section of Ukrainian manufactured and developed weaponry. So Ukraine has begun production of domestic radars for detecting drones. Consultant of the Come Back Alive Foundation has stated such radar stations are already being supplied to the armed forces of Ukraine, namely for drone interceptor units. So that's an illustrative photo. But basically, if you think about the ATPGEO 50 or whatever, those small radars, counter battery radars and counter drone radars that can be fixed to like the top of a Humvee or whatever, quite often you used to see them on Andrew Perpetua's lost list. That's the sort of capability Ukraine would be wise to be producing at scale. They need an awful lot of that tech, and they need to be able to make it themselves. The Ministry of Defense has codified and approved remotely controlled combat module, the Shabir Mark 19, for operation. The module is designed to fire from an automatic grenade launcher of a 40mm caliber. Interesting, I saw and I didn't show it to you because it didn't really show much. You can even see where the grenade landed, but there was an aerial drone with a grenade launcher that I saw the other day firing a Ukrainian one. So here we've got a UGV doing it. The system is integrated both into ground robotic systems and into vehicles as well. So it's not really the drone here, but it's the remotely controlled grenade launcher. So that remotely controlled grenade launcher, you could, I presume, fit it to a pared down version to a larger drone, I guess, in the air. And then this drone here on wheels. Now, talking about wheeled drone, here is the Ministry of Defense codifying the domestic unmanned UGV, unmanned ground vehicle complex, the Dodger. The multifunctional robot has armor protection of the hull from bullets and fragments and is capable of delivering 1/4 of a ton of payload. Pretty useful. I remember speaking to drone manufacturers from the Wild Boar unit in Lviv, and they were saying that wheeled drones are not nearly as good as track drones. They were advocating for track drones. They're just far. You get stuck a lot more with these, he was saying. So just thought I'd throw that nugget in there. And here we have another drone, this one on tracks, and this is a Ukrainian self-propelled multiple launch rocket system drone with installed NURS unit for unguided aircraft missiles. So whacking one of these, you might have seen those. They've got holes. In fact, if I show you this, so I don't know if you can't really see it at that angle. Oh, yeah, at the bottom here. So those holes there, that's what that's what you get. Oh, that sets off my trypophobia or whatever it is. That's the those rocket launches you sometimes see on attack helicopters. They fire off those unguided rockets that then fire into the opposition. This is a UGV set up with one of those launchers, so pretty impressive there. Now, Ukrainian anti-Shahid drone, the anti-Shahid drone, it looks a bit like a Shahid, it's a lot smaller, obviously. These appear to be being developed, these interceptors, 10 a penny at the moment. There are well, Zelensky was saying there are 4 major manufacturers making them at the moment, 2 very successfully, or at least not the manufacturing being successful, but the interception being successful. So this is I believe, a drone to take down Shahids, and we've got a few more images here. It gets launched from that, I presume some kind of catapult launch, shoves it up in the air, and then the propellers take over. Right, then David Kirichenko here gives a bit of a thread on why Ukraine's AI drones aren't a breakthrough yet. So despite early excitement, autonomous targeting drones haven't changed the battlefield, but development continues and the long-term potential remains significant. AI-enabled drones promise a lot: no jamming, no need for constant operator control, potential for swarm attacks, but as of mid-2025, the reality has lagged behind. So AI drones haven't yet delivered on the hype. Problems do include low quality cameras, difficulty with moving targets, and spotty software performance. Ukrainian troops still prefer more dependable alternatives like fiber optic drones that are less susceptible to jamming and have proven results. More than 100 Ukrainian companies are working with AI guidance systems. Some are testing drone swarms, which could overwhelm defences in the future, but progress has been slow and costly. AI drones work best on flat, open ground, not forest or hilly terrain, and price is a major issue. Right now, quote, right now, I'd rather have 3 regular drones than 1 AI drone, said, who is this? Oh, Dimko Zhluktenko, our friend Dimko. So that's what his opinion is. In early 2024, interest surged in AI drones, but after some units brought low-quality systems with no training and got poor results, demand dropped fast. Companies like Twist Robotics are still pushing forward, though. Their development process involves simulators for synthetic training data, real-world fine-tuning, close collaboration with soldiers. Meanwhile, Russia is testing its own AI-guided functions. Some can apparently identify targets like military vehicles, coordinate in small swarms, evade defenders, and switch between AI and operator control mid-flight. So a Russian loitering, and here you've got an example of that, as given evidence supporting those claims, is this AI drone I was talking about recently, which is the what's it called? VBU or something. Just trying to think what the name of it was. He's not put it there. Anyway, I talked about this AI drone that the Russians were utilizing, and there it is. But back to Kirichenko, who says the bottom line is that AI revolution hasn't arrived yet, but the foundations are being built and lessons are being learned fast. With time, smarter drones could become a defining force in this war. Just hasn't happened yet, but it could be on the way. Ukraine, together with NATO partners, are testing new countermeasures against Russian long-range glided bombs, KABs, which are currently difficult to intercept. So we talked about this earlier in the section where I said NATO are helping to develop these, but actually it's in collaboration with the Ukrainians. That's why I've got it here as well. I should have kept them both together. According to Defense UA, the technologies are in the testing phase with deployment planned later this year. So these are currently very difficult to intercept, these guided glide bombs. So it's going to be fascinating to see what they come up with. And Ukraine may join the development of 6th generation fighter jets through International Global Combat Air Program. So this is one that is developing the replacement for the Eurofighter Typhoon by 2035, and it's called the Tempest at the moment, I think. And it is this cooperation between UK, Japan, and Italy, started in 2022. As mentioned, aims to replace the Eurofighter Typhoon, and I guess to be the equivalent of the F-35. Then you've got the F-47 coming online at some point that'll be the distant future that Trump is trying to bring about. He's a 47th president, so that's why he wants it, the F-47. But BAE Systems is one of the main contributors to this project. But Ukraine might step on board to help out as well, so that'll be interesting. I wonder in what capacity, how much can they bring to the table at this stage, with the state they're in terms of being at war. Okay, moving on to other bits and pieces before we'll end with Russia. This is stuff that's adjacent to the war in Ukraine and could have an impact that I just thought would be interesting to throw in. I've already talked about Daniel Ek, co-founder and executive chief exec of Spotify. He's invested 600 million euros in the German defense startup Helsing, which is a company that supplies strike drones to Ukraine. But I just wanted to add this context in, or extra detail. This is from, I don't know, an article. I don't know which article, but anyway. It says Helsing has sold thousands of strike drones produced in its facility in southern Germany to Ukraine. It also secured contracts with the UK, Germany, and Sweden. Prima Matera, the investment company founded by Ek and early Spotify investor Shakil Khan in 2020, made the first significant investment into Helsing in 2021, months before Russia's full-scale invasion of Ukraine. Now Prima Matera is doubling down, Ek told the Financial Times. Quote, there's an enormous realization that it's really now AI. So this is going back to the subject of AI. Although we heard earlier that, it hasn't reached its fruition yet. It is where it's going to be, let's face it, isn't it? So it's really now AI, mass and autonomy that is driving the new battlefield. We can't understate the implications of that for this conflict in Ukraine, or really any conflict going forward, he added. Helsing's investors also include the Swedish defence company Saab, as well as venture capitalists Excel, Lightspeed Ventures, Plural, and General Catalyst. The deal brings its total capital raised to 1.37 billion euros. So there you go. The billionaire, I presume he is, Ek, getting into Helsing. Right. Eight people have been detained in Slovakia over the suspected $7.4 million euro military aid fraud to Ukraine. This is part of the Slovakian aid given to Ukraine earlier in the war, where they are now trying to get hold of the former defense minister on fraud. It could well be politically motivated. That's what these people are saying, or it could have happened. European prosecutors suspect rigged tenders and overpriced ammunition. 4 defense ministry employees are among those in custody. This is perennially going to be the problem, unfortunately, that as soon as I know my partner who's a business manager in a primary school, she talks so often about the prices in education are just so inflated. As soon as, you can buy a bunch of pencils, go out and buy a bunch of pencils, and you go to an education catalogue and you look for pencils for the education, because they know it's, local authorities funded or government funded, the price just goes up, and you're like, oh, really? So this bunch of pencils, and that's why they started giving out credit cards to schools to be able to spend on like eBay and Amazon and whatnot to try and get the prices down, because otherwise you're beholden to these education supplies companies who just inflate the prices. And it's the same here. It's like, it's going to Ukraine, or it's going to the government. The government are going to buy this, and you just whack the price up. And there's always going to be that element of paying over the odds, overpriced ammunition here. So it could well be that there is bona fide issue with these tenders and with the aid packages that went from Slovakia to Ukraine. But it could also be that Robert Fico's government is angling after getting supporters of Ukraine from the former government. I mean, as soon as they took over, we heard that they were going to be looking at doing this. So it could be just completely politicized, but to be honest, I don't know. Today, an agreement was reached in which all 8 parties in Parliament commit to reaching the new NATO spending target. So this is Paul Jonsson from Sweden, the Swedish defense minister, saying as Sweden sets course for 3.5% in military spending and 1.5% in defense related matters, the agreement creates stability over time. This is valuable for NATO. We all agree to speed up the build-up of our total defence, focusing on building up stocks of critical things such as ammunition and air defence systems. The war in Ukraine is a war of warehouses, and Sweden is drawing lessons from that, with the possibility of taking a loan for 300 billion Swedish krona. 250 billion can be used for military defence, up to 50 billion for civilian defence and critical infrastructures. Loans make it possible to get funding fast, and we need to increase our Swedish defence forces fast. So this could be part of the Rearm Europe project that Ursula von der Leyen is bringing about. So the access to that kind of funding in order to beef up European defence as well as seek to aid Ukraine. Russia is rearming and has bigger geopolitical aims than to take control of Ukraine. Russian aggression will now be met with stronger Swedish investments in defence and security, as well as continued military support for Ukraine. We make these investments to be able to continue to live in peace and prosperity. Future generations of Swedes and Europeans will get to see stronger defence forces that will safeguard freedom. It is for them and the soldiers fighting in Ukraine that we are doing this. So good words there from Paul Jonsson, but this real strong commitment to raise spending as a percentage of GDP, really to 5% is what I get here from this. 3.5% on military spending and 1.5% in defence-related matters. This is what I've talked about previously, which is where do you draw the line with regard to defence expenditure? So if you are required to spend, say, 2% of your GDP on defence, but what if you only spend 1.8% on your own military, but like another 1% on support for Ukraine in other ways, which is the same as that is defense. You could be investing in their defense industry, but does that count as your defense expenditure? You can be even helping out with refugees and I don't know, more humanitarian or civic stuff within Ukraine, but it's all part of helping Ukraine to defend itself against Russia, supporting Ukraine. Ukraine needs both military equipment and civic funding, and without the civic funding, the society falls apart, and so there's no point giving them weaponry because there is no Ukraine left from a kind of infrastructural point of view. But if you give them all this civic funding and none of the weaponry, then they just lose the war, and all of that civic infrastructure gets taken over by Russia. So you need to do both. So then when you're working out, well, you guys haven't spent enough. So like the US might look at Eastern European nations and say, you haven't spent enough on your defense. It's like, yeah, but we've been helping out with an absolute ton of Ukrainian refugees that come across the border in a way that you haven't because you're across an ocean from here. So the expenditure, for example, Poland and Germany on humanitarian stuff, you could argue that should fit under defense spending. It is a way of defending Europe and helping out Ukraine. And so, sometimes you could argue there's a kind of arbitrary line there. Now, that shouldn't be coming next. That should be, where do we have that? That should be at the end there. Okay. The Iron Dome, which is the air defense network, if you like, system that Israel has as a very small country, I mean geographically small, to defend their airspace from hostile threats. Iron Dome is intercepting 0% of Iranian ballistic missiles, says Colby Badwa. I don't know of the truth of this. He says it's Arrow and David Sling that have a 65% interception rate. And then he goes to NBC News. Only 65% of the missiles launched by Iran in the last 24 hours were intercepted by the country's Iron Dome system, versus almost 90% the day before, a senior intelligence official in Israel told NBC News. Iran still has very advanced missiles, and they are making use of them, the former top-level Israeli intelligence official who still receives daily government briefings said. So it seems to be 60% of missiles launched by Iran were intercepted by, so that's missiles, it's not necessarily ballistic missiles. Here he says it's intercepting 0% of ballistic missiles. It's Arrow and David Sling, which are not part of the Iron Dome, it appears. Someone else says, unfortunately, Iron Dome has name recognition as a system that keeps Israeli skies clear, further muddied by Trump wanting Golden Dome, which would be comparable and superior to Arrow. So anyway, let's have a quick look at Arrow. So the Iron Dome, it was not designed to take down ballistic missiles, but more like so here it says, developed by Rafael Advanced Defense Systems and Israel Aerospace Industries to intercept and destroy short-range rockets and artillery shells fired from distances of 4 to 70 kilometers. So this is when you had your proxies, or your Hamas and your Hezbollah, firing, rockets over into Israel, and the Iron Dome takes that down. But when it comes to like big ballistic missiles, it's not Iron Dome that is suited to taking those things down. So you have Arrow, the Arrow missile family, designed to fulfill an Israeli requirement for a missile defense system that would be more effective against ballistic missiles than the MIM-104 Patriot surface-to-air missile. So this is a relatively recent, in service from 2000 to present. You've now got, is it Arrow 4? I think now Arrow 1, Arrow 2, Block 3, Block 4 there, Block 5. Arrow 3, Arrow 4, no, you do have, and Arrow 5. So you've got all of these, variants of the Arrow system that appear to be doing a really good job of taking down, or a fairly good job of taking down the Iranian ballistic missiles. And then you got David Sling, which is Israel Defense Forces military system jointly developed by the Israeli defense contractor Rafael, again, and Raytheon, who make Patriot. Came operational in 2017, so much more recent than the original Arrow. It is designed to intercept enemy planes, drones, tactical ballistic missiles, medium to long range rockets and cruise missiles, fired at a range of 40 to 300 kilometers. David Sling is intended to replace the MIM-23 Hawk and the MIM-104 Patriot in the Israeli arsenal. So they're getting rid of their Patriot systems, some of them ending up going to Ukraine potentially, and replacing them with the Arrow family and David Sling as well. Now, what Colby Badwar says is, we have Fabian Hoffman says, given the data emerging from Israel, Raytheon, Kongsberg, and Diehl should probably consider testing the feasibility of employing NASAMS and RST SLM in a limited ballistic missile defense role if they don't do so already. So I don't know what data he's talking about, but it could well be that some of these systems that are not Arrow and not David Sling, but more your anti-cruise missile systems or anti-aircraft systems that are analogous to the NASAMS and the RST in that are being used in Ukraine, but NASAMS is a Norwegian American co-production, RST is your German, that's the SLM medium range air defense system. There must be some data to suggest that ballistic missiles have been shot down by analogs to these, and so therefore these companies that make these systems should look into whether there's a feasibility for employing these to take down ballistic missiles in a limited way, if they don't do so already. So the Russian 9M723 SRBMs, these ballistic missiles, likely exhibit significantly more aggressive end-stage maneuvering than the Iranian ones, but that's short-range ballistic missiles than the Iranian medium-range ones. But it's still worth exploring. But if Stunners and Tamirs can take down, so that must be these Israeli missiles can take down medium-range ballistic missile warheads, why not the AIM-120C and the RST-SL? In other words, so it seems that Israeli missiles and systems are taking down ballistic missiles when you wouldn't think they would be able to. So why not try out some NASAMS? And it'll be a lot cheaper if they can, but you might have to use more. I don't know. Might be a false economy. Even achieving a P of 0.2 to 0.3 would be something. So I presume that means 20 to 30% interception rate. The defendable footprint is obviously a factor and a big disadvantage compared to systems optimized for BMD, but for point defense of critical infrastructure or city districts, maybe. In other words, that you wouldn't, because of the range of these things and so on and so forth, it wouldn't be your first line of defense, maybe. But if you put some NASAMS around, or IST that they're getting plenty of, if you put them around some critical infrastructure, say in Kiev, then it gives you, or further back, then it gives you a potential to take down ballistic missiles using alternative weapon systems. Now, France is investing 717 million euros in satellite communications operator Eutelsat. So Eutelsat has said that they basically need a whole bunch of money to even begin to compete with Starlink and Musk's Starlink. But given that Musk has a kind of near monopoly in terms of this kind of provision, there needs to be an alternative. Specifically, if Musk is a wingnut and the US don't become, or US aren't reliable allies. And so the French here are thinking we need to build up a European alternative. So they are investing 717 million spondulies in that. And France will increase its ownership stake in this company, which will improve its autonomy in providing itself and Europe with satellite communications. So that is happening. And indeed, France, Emmanuel Macron, the president, released this the other day. European friends, you have a call, and mobile call from Rafale. Rafale is calling. In other words, can you come and help out us? Well, can you buy some Rafales, please? Because we need to be buying European, and rather than relying too much on, say, the United States. Now, Ulf Kristersson, the Prime Minister for Sweden, replied to this. I was looking here to see if I could find his reply, but I haven't. I showed it to you the other day. He replied saying, there's the GlobalEye, the Swedish, the Saab AWACS plane, of which 2 have been provided to the Ukrainians. He said, don't forget us as well. So there is this desire to buy European from within Europe in light of the pretty unreliable allies developing it in the form of the United States. Jane Kiev says that it only took Trump 6 months to destroy the largest market for US weapons. So there is this continued bubbling, I guess, conversation going on in Europe, but also Canada and Australia and other places with regard to moving away from dependence on the US military industrial complex. Now, France unveils the AASM Hammer XLR. Now, this doesn't have anything necessarily to do with the Ukrainians. However, they are producing 100 Hammer 250, AASM 250 Safran for Ukraine at the moment. They've doubled the provision to Ukraine. It was 50 a month, now it's 100 a month. And Ukraine, as I keep showing you on a daily basis, are using these guided glide bombs, which also do have a bit of rocket propulsion on the back. These aren't just your guided glide bombs, I think, like the GBU varieties. I think there's a little bit more range that can be eked out of them, and that might help because they're dropped from a lower altitude than is ideal. When you don't have air supremacy, then the airspaces are contested, and it means you can't get to a high altitude safely to drop these things and give them the maximal range, because you are vulnerable to enemy air defenses. So you have to fly low, and then you pull up last minute, drop them off, so these bombs go on a trajectory like that, and hopefully you can get enough range off them. Well, if you get a bit of extra rocket propulsion, which I think the Hammers do have, then you get extra range. Well, now With the XLR variant, it's reported that its range has increased to 150 to 200 kilometers when launched from high altitude. So let's scale that back. Let's say from low altitude, you're getting to 100 kilometers. Wow. Then already you can release these from further away, or you can get closer to the front line to hit things deeper behind the contact line. Now, Ukraine, surely Safran are going to want the Ukrainians to have these, obviously to make money out of that, but also to test these in a war environment. I can imagine the French getting these to Ukraine. And the Ukrainians are going to be like, yeah, we'll have them. Now, I reported the other day that 4 wealthy tech executives from Meta, OpenAI, Palantir were sworn into the US Army Reserve at the Lieutenant Colonel level. And this has been seen as pretty controversial by some. The move is part of a new program called the Executive Innovation Corps. I think it's 201. The move is it allows civilian billionaires and multimillionaires to skip traditional military service and training instead of earning their rank through years of service. They were given direct commissions and will serve part-time as advisors on AI, cybersecurity and modernization, says Andrew Mercado. Many veterans, including myself, see this as a disgrace. The rank of Lieutenant Colonel takes only 2 decades of service to earn, takes nearly 2 decades of service to earn. Giving it to civilians with no military background because of their corporate status insults every soldier who worked, bled, and sacrificed for their rank. It devalues the uniform and sends the message that money and influence now mean more than duty and experience. The other side of the coin would be, well, actually, these guys are going to give really valuable AI direction to the armed forces. So it's this kind of public-private partnership, so on and so forth. So lots of people have been, this is scary, having Palantir of all people in the middle of the military. That is scary. And you're just giving them commissions at lieutenant colonel level. It is not cool. So there are going to be arguments going both ways on this. However, let's just listen to this excerpt from, I wonder who, the co-founder of Palantir here.
Point to understand is
they were going to throw flowers at us in Iraq. That never happened.
Yeah, well, and I'm not saying they're going to throw flowers at us here, but this is a lot different situation. And it's I work with a lot of amazing Persian people. I'm really excited to invest in Iran if we can get this country to be some sort of republic, not run by crazy people. And that's a lot easier than doing that in Afghanistan or somewhere else.
Well, so how much do you think this is about? We were talking to the Minister of the Economy in Israel. Is it about regime change, like full-on regime change in Iran, versus just eliminating the nuclear threat?
Well, it's very clear that this administration says it's about eliminating the nuclear threat. That's their goal. I respect that. When we attacked Iraq 20 years ago, even then I thought it was a mistake versus going after Iran. Iran's clearly a really evil regime. So I've been against the Iranian regime. I've been for freeing Iran for a long time. That is not what this administration says they're doing, and I respect that. I think it is critical we get rid of the nukes.
Okay, so from what...
So I did a breaking news update earlier to go against actually what he said, because it looks like Trump has actually potentially hinted at advocating for a regime change. But nonetheless, he's saying the present administration is interested in blowing up nuclear facilities. I think there should be a regime change. I think when we went into Iraq, it should have been actually Iran. Iran are the evil people. I know loads of Persian people. I would like to invest in Iran. I'd like to get in there, blah, 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 blah. You got Palantir, the co-founder of Palantir, saying, I think we should have regime change in Iran, and I would like to invest in Iran, blah, blah, blah. And then you have these people getting put into lieutenant colonel positions in the armed forces. And you're thinking, oh my goodness, when you start marrying the private and the public so closely as this, and you start putting private citizens who are essentially CEOs, CTOs, COOs of these corporations into these positions, then you are blurring the agenda of what you want to achieve with your armed forces. And I know it's armed forces are, we can talk about Smedley Butler again, and the idea that they're furthering the interests of the country that they're sort of fighting for. They essentially become racketeers, our armed forces, because our national interests are essentially economic and thus kind of corporate interests. And this argument will go on, not all the time. And I think Ukraine is in a good example of that, although there are obviously strategic economic interests in supporting Ukraine as well. So I'm just warning that whenever I see Palantir, red flags are raised. I think they are a company to look out for very much. They are kind of Skynex of Terminator type thing. I am deeply worried about the direction of travel of Palantir, and this kind of setup I think is potentially very worrying, especially when the sorts of people that are involved with Palantir are advocating for regime change around the world so that they can make big corporate investments into those countries. I think it all becomes a little bit like the old school. I've always been anti-military industrial complex in that kind of understanding of it. But now I understand military industrial complex is super important for being able to defend that which is right around the world. So we need to support the military industrial complex in supporting Ukraine. But it's not to say there aren't areas where there are deep, deep concerns about sort of not so much profiteering, but sort of profiteering for power. Anyway, worry. Chinese have now developed a drone that's the size of a mosquito. Lots of people are reporting on this. It's got a camera and is designed for battlefield reconnaissance. Just look at the size of that. Absolutely incredible. So I wonder whether, we're going to start seeing Chinese tech end up on the battlefield in Ukraine. Now, talking of which, let's go to Russia. Sanction loopholes allow Russia to produce its Oreshnik intercontinental missiles with Western components, said President Zelensky himself. He added that 21 of the 39 companies which supply parts for missiles are not under any sanctions. So 21 of the 39 companies around the world providing components for, say, the Oreshnik are not sanctioned. How is that happening? There are sanction loopholes. And of course, the US isn't interested in putting further sanctions on anyone. They're reducing sanctions. So it's really difficult. Russia's Oreshnik missile production can be halted by urgent sanctions. So in line with that, then Zelensky says, well, let's then actually sanction them. Russia launched the first experimental Oreshnik against Dnipro on November the 21st. And obviously, they keep threatening Ukraine with these. Now, Russian Shahed 136 long-range kamikaze drone with a camera and a NVIDIA Jetson AI development module. So again, American components here that could allow some autonomy was recovered. The drone also had a radio modem allowing direct operator control up to 150 kilometers or more with repeaters. Previously guided solely by satellite navigation, says Roy. The Shahed may now have the option of terrain following, GPS-free navigation, so it can't be spoofed or interfered with for GPS. That would negate Ukraine's extensive electronic warfare jamming. There is still an 8-antenna circular CRPA, I don't know what that means, satellite navigation system on board. So I guess it means it's got all types of navigation systems, so it can just evade being messed with or can operate under GPS. The Jetson computer module has considerable capacity for machine learning, allowing terminal targeting and autonomy. This further frees the drone from GPS jamming that degrades targeting accuracy, so it can rely not on GPS but on AI selecting targets on the hoof. These developments are of great concern for Ukraine as Shahed production ramps up. So more challenges for Ukraine in trying to fight these Shaheds. So it's going to be, I think, a mixture of electronic warfare, but also lots of old school shooting these bad boys down, getting interceptor drones out to do that, flying alongside them with other planes with electronic warfare and jamming. But if these are more resistant, then you're going to have to get out your shotgun and blow them out of the sky. Russia already so reliant on North Korea, and possibly even more so, says Tim White, if Iran cannot give weapons or even technology. So now Japan's NHK News reports that North Korea, and I mentioned this the other day in my hits and losses, reportedly sending 25,000 people to work at Russia's drone manufacturing plants to boost production. Deeply, deeply worrying there. 25,000 people is a huge number of people and is a deep concern. We had already heard 1,000 sappers going for demining, 5,000 people going for reconstruction, North Koreans, and people were already saying, well, that's 6,000 troops. Yeah, some people denying that they were going to fulfill those roles that were publicly claimed, that there's just 6,000 more troops. And then we've got 25,000 people going to Yelabuga to train on how to produce the Shahed drones to then go back to North Korea and build them in North Korea, but also possibly just help build even more of them in Russia. This is just a way of pumping out tons of these Shahed drones. This should be a deep, deep concern to the Ukrainians and to the international community, whereby the sanctioned country of North Korea is helping Russia with impunity. What is the response from the international community? So yeah, 25,000 workers to go to Russia for drone production. Pyongyang may deploy them to a drone factory in Yelabuga to help boost Russia's drone output. The goal is to train those North Koreans in manufacturing and operating drones like Garan. At the same time, Ukraine's intelligence says Russia is helping North Korea build strike drones themselves, some of which may be shipped back to Russia for use in the war against Ukraine. Sergei Shoigu, the former defense minister, has just visited North Korea again and confirmed 6,000 North Korean workers are heading to Russia. So it's all very worrying, I would suggest. Anyway, that's enough from me. I really appreciate your support. Thank you so much. Don't forget, you can help us out at atpgeo.com/donate for the Car for Ukraine campaign. We're already just about halfway there. People are helping us out even more so since I've started talking about it more openly. Thank you to Richard Jackson, very kindly donating a whole bunch today. I really appreciate that. Thank you to all the people who have been so generous to this campaign and all the campaigns. So please check that out and help accordingly if you can. Take care. Speak to you soon. Toodle pips.